What's up, everybody, and welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and we have got a busy episode today. We're about 1 month in to the college basketball season, a little bit over, and we are going to be handing out our 1 month awards. The awards you're going to see at the end of the season, like Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, Freshman of the Year, but we've also got some more creative ones, most surprising freshman, best transfer, few different things we've got planned for you. Before we get to that, make sure you like, share, and subscribe here in the 24/7 Sports channel. Let's get into it. I'm going to welcome in 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Isaac Trotter to help me break this down. Trotter, what's up, man?
What's up, man? How we doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
Awesome. Let's go.
All right, so here's what we got today. We are going to each answer these questions. We are going to start with the MVP of the season 1 month in. Your pick, Trotter, is who?
Johni Broome out of Auburn. He would be my pick from the preseason, and it's been that way through the first month of the year. He has a plus 33 net rating so far through the first month of the season. That's Zach Edey type of levels in college basketball. That's hallowed ground. And Broome has really just been tremendous this season for who are an Auburn team that I think has been the best team in the country. They're number one in my power rankings right now. And I think that Bruce Pearl deserves a ton of credit for changing his rotations a little bit. This was a guy that was closer to a 50-50 player last year. He'd play like 23, 24, 25 minutes at times at the 4 or the 5. This year, they've really played him way, way more. He's way closer to a 30-minute per game type of guy, and his numbers have just exploded. Offensively, defensively, shooting the three, the touch on the floaters, the passing, the rebounding, one of the best offensive rebounders in the sport. Like, you go up and down like the list. Johni Broome checks off every box that you'd want from a big man, and it's really crazy that he was starting his career at Morehead State a few years ago. He's been the best player in the country so far this season.
All right, I can't argue that, but I have a somewhat different perspective. If you've been watching the show a long time, you know, Trotter, he likes him some Auburn. But I like myself some Cam Jones, and that's why we're going to talk about Marquette's point guard here. 20 points, almost 7 assists, almost 5 boards, and almost 2 steals per game. And you know what else? It's only averaging 1.4 turnovers per game. Now, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the statistical profile. How about this? He's in the 95th percentile in terms of catch and shoot players. He's in the 90th percentile in terms of layup makers, and that's for everyone, not just guards. So you've got an elite shot maker and then an elite layup maker. On top of that, this is a player who was playing alongside Tyler Kolek. At the beginning of the season, Shaka Smart said, we're going to see his passing this year. And boy, have we ever. His assist to turnover numbers, and I want to give this appropriate credit. As I was researching this, it was Cracked Sidewalks who first pointed this out. Great little nugget here. The only player in the last 15 years with a 40% plus assist ratio and a less than 10% turnover rate. I mean, just absolutely incredible what he is doing with the ball in his hands this year. And Trotter, I will say this as well. Marquette is 9-1. Their only loss is at Iowa State. Iowa State's one of the hardest places to play in the country. Granted, he didn't have his best shooting night that night, but he still almost got a triple-double. He did get a triple-double against Purdue. Against Wisconsin, he had 32, 6, and 4. So this guy has done it just about every night. And the final point I want to make is I think the roster construction around Cam Jones is near perfect because with Chase Ross and Stevie Mitchell, he's got 2 really good perimeter defenders to insulate him a little bit on that end of the floor. And then up front, when they've got Ben Gold and David Joplin, he's got 2 stretch bigs who open that lane and create the space for him to go to work. Those 2 guys in tandem are averaging over 13 3-point attempts per game. That means you are having premium floor spacing, and that is an ideal scenario when you have a playmaking lead guard like Cam Jones, who I think has been as good as anyone. And I still believe, despite all the narratives in the last couple of years, college basketball is a guard's game, and Cam Jones has been the best guard in the country so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to be a Mark Sears or RJ Davis conversation who the best guard in college basketball was, and Cam has made that point moot at this point. I think your best point was the layups. He is the most creative layup maker in college basketball. It's unbelievable. Like some of the shots that he just gets over these shot blockers, it's just, how is that going in? And just ridiculous touch. Cam Jones has been awesome this year.
No doubt. All right, best freshman. I think one of these guys, maybe both of them, have a case to be in the conversation for best overall player. But I will give you first pick here for your best freshman. Who you got?
Why do I have to do this? Like, this is a tough, brutal exercise. I'll stick with Cooper Flagg, the type of guy that I think a lot of people were having at the beginning of the season. Just the defensive impact. You just watch him against Auburn, and he's guarding so many different guys. And I think Duke's done a good job of trying to weaponize his cutting a little bit. I think the one thing that's been a little bit frustrating is that the 2 turnovers in late game scenarios, one against Kansas and the other against Kentucky, have maybe skewed the narrative a little bit about Cooper Flagg's overall freshman season. He's been tremendous defensively and offensively. I was talking with Eric Bossi about this, who covered him as closely as basically anybody throughout the high school ranks. Like, he never really got a ton of opportunities at Montverde last year to play in close games because Montverde was awesome. They went 33-0, won a ton of games by a huge margin. This is like his first real chance to get multiple opportunities in late game scenarios. So I think he's just going to keep getting better and better at that. We've already seen progress with that in the first 3 weeks, but he's number one for me just because of the defense. Although I will say this freshman class is absolutely phenomenal.
Phenomenal. And you know who else has been phenomenal? Dylan Harper has been absolutely terrific for Rutgers. Coming off a big game last night, averaging 23 points per game, shooting 51% from the floor, averaging 5 rebounds, almost 5 assists against 2 turnovers. I'm going to go on record here, and I've said this before. If Dylan Harper shoots the ball from 3, it is an absolute wrap. That is the swing skill that will decide if he is a very good player at the highest level versus a potentially elite player at the highest level. And if he is making threes, you better watch out, because this guy is just going to take his game to a whole nother level. Now, he's made 8 threes in the last 2 games, still only shooting 33% on the season, but the shooting is trending in the right direction. And as I said, if he starts making threes, it is over, because this guy, he's too big, he's too strong. His amount of skill combined with strength and balance as a finisher has been so impressive. His feel for the game, because he's playing with the ball in his hands and he's a legit big point guard now. There was some dialogue in high school about whether he was a combo or whether he was a point guard. Sometimes he's on the ball, sometimes he's off the ball. It's pretty clear he is now a lead guard, and that's going to be his position moving forward. I've loved everything about him. From a sheer statistics standpoint, he's the best freshman in the country. Cooper's impact on winning on a Duke team, that we're going to talk about this in a minute, I think is probably the favorite to win the national championship. That's the basis for his case. But Dylan Harper has been every bit as good as advertised. I look back at some of my old notes. Right after the McDonald's All-American game last year, I said on the record he would be the best guard in the freshman class this year. He has done that, in my opinion. I think he's also got a very strong case to be the best overall player in this year's freshman class.
His drives are ridiculously impactful. You just see him put dudes on his hips and get to the rim. If you track some of those things, his self-created shots at the rim that he's generating right now, it's all-time stuff compared to some of the elite freshmen that we've seen through the sport. Harper's been phenomenal, and there's been no question who the best player on that team is. It's not a Dylan Harper or a Spaley. It's Dylan Harper. Hands down, easily the number one player on that team. Kind of like what we talked about in the preseason, how he was probably closer to the ready-made version for the college game.
Let me make a quick point off that, because about Cooper, your choice. I think Cooper has been about what we expected, and yet still has so much room for growth with regard to the shooting and the self-creation. And yet, I feel like his hold on the number 1 pick in the draft, projection-wise, has only increased, because as good as Dylan Harper has been, I think Ace Bailey was really the only guy who could challenge Cooper for that spot going into this season. That was my perception going into the year. And Ace has not played up to the level yet where anybody is really contemplating taking him over Cooper. So I think your point about Dylan being the best freshman is spot on. And I think that has also kind of widened Cooper's lead, if you will, to be the number 1 pick in the draft come June. All right, let's keep it moving here. I said we'd get a little bit more creative with some of these categories, and this is going to be the first such one. We're going to talk about the most surprising player. And because Trotter and I are positive people, we're going to make this the most pleasant surprise. Trotter, age before beauty. Who you got?
So for me, it's Tomi Avicic out of Illinois. I think a lot of people looked at him and like, hey, what are we getting from this guy? He's an international product, like had played in the Adriatic League. Like, how's he going to translate to the high major ranks? And he's been phenomenal 15 points, 9 rebounds a game. What he's giving Illinois as a pick and pop big man is unbelievable. He hit 6 threes on Thanksgiving Day against Arkansas. He has a strap. Like, he is a 7'2" big man that can absolutely shred you from downtown. And then, as obviously on that pick and roll game, his feel with the short roll has been phenomenal. His touch in the middle of the floor is really good. I wouldn't say he's an elite back to the basket guy or an elite post up guy or maybe like an elite playmaker either, but he's just good enough in all those areas. And I think the one area that Illinois staff would tell you, he's been way better than they expected defensively as well. His feel, his IQ, the way to get his hands on basketballs in the paint, his ability to play drop coverage. Illinois has this 3rd highest rate of forcing non-rim twos. They just force a ton of mid-range jumpers. That's all because Vicic has really executed their defensive plan pretty well for the most part. So the Big Ten is filled with big men that are awesome. Like, we got Danny Wolf, like you have Vlad Golden, Umar Ballo, Malik Renew, Nate Biddle's been terrific this year. Great Osber at Washington, like Owen Freeman. Like, Illinois may have found a top 5 big man, and I don't think anybody was predicting that when they landed a Vicic, in the international market.
And he's also the best one in his family, dare I say. But that's a conversation for another day. All right, my most surprising player, and this isn't a huge surprise because everybody knew he'd be good, but I don't think people knew he was going to be this good, and that is Eric Dixon from Villanova. I mean, we are talking about 26 points per game. How about these shooting splits? 53% from the floor, 54% from the three-point line. And if you're thinking, oh, it must be on high volume, no. He's taking 7 threes a game. In fact, he's making 3.7 out of 6.8 threes per game. Just absolutely elite stuff. Then he's knocking down 85% of his free throws. Here are the advanced metrics on him. He is 20th overall in usage, which is 3rd among high major players. He's got the #1 offensive rating in KenPom. He's 3rd overall in player efficiency in Division I. He's 2nd overall in the country in scoring, and he's 7th in KenPom's Player of the Year rankings, which is analytically driven. So all the analytics absolutely love him. And you know what? When you're shooting that kind of numbers from the floor, the numbers don't have to get all that sophisticated because it's just super clear. Now, beyond the numbers, let's talk about the obvious. This was a big year for Villanova, and they did not get off to the start they wanted, but they have rebounded, especially last week when they beat Cincinnati, arguably the biggest win of Kyle Neptune's tenure so far. And they are doing it with a lineup that is basically Eric Dixon and everybody else. This guy is scoring in every spot on the floor. He'll take you into the post. He'll pump fake you until you finally leave your feet. Then he'll get the twos. Not only is he making threes, he's making tough threes. He made a huge one off the dribble late in that Cincinnati game. He's making some movement threes. Now, this is a fifth-year senior who's taking advantage of that COVID year. He's been absolutely spectacular for Villanova. And although we knew he was going to be good, this is a guy who averaged 17 and 7 last year. I don't know that anybody thought he was going to be quite this good. I'm not sure there's any player in the country who is more important to their team than Eric Dixon is to Villanova.
There isn't. There's so many times where it's late game situations where it's like, oh my God, please give the ball to Eric Dixon and get out of the way so that he can make a shot. And he continues to come through.
There you go. All right. We're going to keep the most surprising theme going, and we're going to shift back to the freshmen. So we've talked about freshmen a lot in this show. We've profiled the Coopers, the Dillons, the Aces, the VJs. We've talked about the international guys who've had such success. We've talked about in past episodes, we talked about guys like Derek Queen and Boogie Fland, who are, McDonald's All-Americans, but have been even better than advertised. We're going to try and come up with some new names here because, quite frankly, there's other guys who deserve attention. Who has been the most pleasant surprise among the freshman class for you?
Well, I can't use this time to talk about LeBaron Philon again. So I'm going to go to Michigan State and talk about Jace Richardson, who I think has just been, at times, Michigan State's best player, especially defensively. The ability to fight over screens. He just stays attached to shooters. He doesn't make freshman mistakes defensively. Really, his numbers, they maybe look like okay, 10 points a game, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. But he's only playing 20 minutes a game right now. Some of that's injury based. Some of that is Michigan State has a pretty deep team that they're rotating a lot of guys. I think he needs to have even more minutes as the season progresses. And I think Tom Izzo will continue to do that as Big Ten play starts to heat up here in a couple weeks. Richardson's phenomenal. His playmaking has been awesome. He makes terrific decisions with the ball in his hands, and he just doesn't hurt you. He just makes shots, high IQ. You can see him cut well off the ball. Like, I don't know what else you'd want from him this year. And, this freshman class is loaded and everyone's looking and going like, hey, how is this guy a mid-30s freshman? Well, look at the list. Like, there's so many great freshmen in this class, but Michigan State has gotten a huge boost from him. And, Jaden Akins has been awesome, but I think it's coming where Jace Richardson ends up being Michigan State's best player by, now already, honestly.
No, I think there certainly have been moments. I want to share one story about Jace Richardson because you mentioned like he was in the mid-30s last year. Right around McDonald's All-American time, if you're in that kind of 20 to 40 range, you're on the McDonald's bubble, so to speak. And inevitably, there's going to be a lot of guys who are disappointed if they don't hear their name called on that selection show. Jace Richardson was one of those guys. But I vividly remember he went on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, immediately after and had such a classy post about not making the game, and whether or not there was a parent who advised him or guided him there. But everything about that was that, like, hey, this kid gets it. Obviously he's got, he's grown up around the game. His dad was a great NBA player, and he's proved it himself that he's a talented young man, but you can also see like he gets it. And we've seen that this year too, because we've seen him continue to get better. And I agree with you. He has been a pleasant surprise. And if he's not Michigan State's best player now, I think he's going to continue to be. And if he ever comes back for his sophomore year, which in this draft, I think might be a good idea, I think he could be one of the best guards in college basketball a year from now. All right. I am going with Jeremy Fears as my most pleasant surprise in this freshman class. Jeremy Fears is a reclass up. He played in the EYBL, even in the Peach Jam, as recently as July, and then he decided to go immediately to college. He was previously committed to Illinois and then ended up in Oklahoma because they had an immediate opportunity for him. What to me is most impressive, and we can talk about the numbers and we will, but he is defying a trend. And that trend is it is really difficult, historically speaking, for reclassified guards to have an immediate impact on college basketball. There is a long list of once highly ranked prospects who skipped a year, go to college a year early, and then didn't, even if they were productive, weren't as good as they were expected to be. Guys like, most recently, Elliot Cadeau last year. Prior to that, guys like Christian Lander, Devin Askew, Justice Williams, Carter Witt, Ashton Hagans, Derek Thornton. These were players who people may not remember. They may not be talked about as much now, but once upon a time, they were some of the highest rated high school guards in the country. And then they skipped that last step in the process. And it is so incredibly hard to go to college a year earlier than most people expected and have an immediate impact, not be there for the whole summer session. But that is exactly what Jeremy Fears is doing. He just turned 18 in October. He's got terrific size. Now, the other thing that he's always had a ton of game with the ball in his hands. He could play make. He had a lot of mid-range tools. Although he's never really shot a high percentage from three, he's always had a pretty good-looking stroke. And sometimes when you just watch the guys go out and ball, you can say, hey, that guy's got game. And that's always been Jeremy Fears. But to produce at the level he has for an Oklahoma team that is winning to the extent that it has, I think just speaks not only volumes about his talent level, but I think we've also got to give Porter Moser a lot of credit here, because he is not only given this freshman the rope to go out and play through mistakes, but he's surrounded him with a lot of spacing. About 47% of Oklahoma's shots are threes, so they space the floor really well. And the other really notable difference to me for Fears is that he is making quicker decisions with the basketball. This is someone in high school who was kind of known for taking tough shots, sometimes monopolizing the ball. And listen, he's still 12th overall in the country in usage. Like, he's got the ball in his hands a lot, but when the ball swings, it doesn't stick as much anymore. He's more willing to make that extra one. So I've seen a ton of growth, as much physically as with the processing of the game. And he has been he's been terrific, exceeded my expectations. I think he's exceeded everyone's expectations. And he certainly defied the trend, because there's a lot of guards before him who tried this reclass plan and it didn't work out so well.
It really helps to go places where your bigs set good screens. Jalen Moore, really physical and a good screener, and Sam Godwin, super underrated screener as well for Oklahoma. So, yeah, Jeremiah Fears has been absolutely phenomenal this year for Oklahoma.
All right, before we get going on the best transfer, let's talk about this 24/7 Sports channel that you are watching. Make sure you subscribe. If you were following college football this week, then you've already been on this channel, and we have year-round the best there is to offer in college basketball and football, recruiting, transfer portal, and the season itself. Everything you could possibly want. Watch it on your TV, watch it on your phone, watch it on your tablet, watch it wherever you get your content. The 24/7 Sports channel. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. All right, Trotter, we are going to talk transfers. The number one, and I should also say, I think we're going to have an episode focused exclusively on this. We're going to bring in what I like to call the czar of the transfer portal, Travis Branham, to grade some of last year's choices. But I want to get your take. Who do you think has been the best transfer in college basketball so far?
Well, full disclosure, I had to submit this pick yesterday. If I had to do it today, I probably would have done Chaz Lanier out of Tennessee with what he's continuing to do. But I'm looking at PJ Haggerty out of Memphis. I think Penny Hardaway, this transfer class has been really, really good for them. And Haggerty is a huge reason why. 23 points a game is insane. 3 assists, 5 rebounds. I think one thing I keep thinking about this year is not all non-rim twos are created equally. And Haggerty's ability to just get into the middle of the floor, and he makes the tough twos that a lot of teams are trying to force. He's so big, he's so physical, and one thing that we've noticed from him as a transfer up candidate, that free throw rate that he had last year has absolutely translated to Memphis, and Memphis has played a really tough schedule as well. He's able to get to the free throw line. He's constantly creating advantages, just finding ways to wiggle into the paint and get his defender up in the air and get to the free throw line. And all of that stuff continues to matter. And I think he's looking like one of the premier scorers in college basketball, not just transfers, like any scorer in college basketball. And Memphis, they've had a couple little rough patches here lately after Maui, maybe the Maui hangover a little bit, but they proved at Maui they can play with literally anybody. If they get into the tournament, they got multiple guards that have serious juice, and Haggerty's really the number one on that scouting report right now.
All right, now, as we talk about the best transfers in the country, you mentioned Haggerty, deservedly so. We have already broken down on this show in the last couple of weeks Chaz Lanier. We've talked about Adu Thero. We've talked about John Tanji. I'm going to view this as who would be my 5th player on the all-transfer team right now. And so, because I don't want to regurgitate anything we've said on those guys, and I'm going Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf flirted with a triple-double last night in the Jimmy V Classic, has been absolutely just terrific for Michigan. The Yale transfer, this is someone I watched quite a bit in high school. He was at Northfield Mount Herman, kind of had a little bit of an injury-plagued senior season, was vastly under-recruited. I don't want to take a victory lap, but I told you so. And goes to Yale, doesn't have like a great freshman season. In fact, he didn't really play the entire season. Breaks out last year, averages basically a double-double, 12 and 10. Yale goes to the NCAA tournament. They beat Auburn. Now he goes to Michigan and puts up 14, 9, and 9 last night. Last 4 games, Trotter, against Xavier, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Arkansas. This guy's averaging 17 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. He's in better shape. He's gotten much more comfortable playing through the level of physicality that we see in the lane. And he's gotten thrown into the fire, so to speak, and he's figured it out because both his body and his game are on unprecedented levels. He's risen like a phoenix, as Dan Hurley would say, in the last 2 weeks, like maybe no one in college basketball. And I don't think that's going to stop. My one question is, and this is what he's got to answer, when those nagging injuries happen this year, because it happens to all players, is he able to play through it? That is going to be the key to Danny Wolf's season. Right now, he has been as good as any transfer big in the class, in my opinion. I absolutely love the way that Dusty May is using him. It's not just like pick and pop action. It's not just inverted ball screens. We've seen a ton of 4-5 ball screens. We're seeing them get him on the move. They're running him off pin downs. They're running him off stackers. And then they're allowing him to play make because he's such a good ball handler at his size, listed at 7 feet, and can capitalize. His finishing rate at the rim is even better than it was last year in the Ivy League. And I have a lot of respect for the Ivy League, but that's not apples to apples. So the craft that he's showing this year has been very real. Danny Wolf is certainly would be on my all first team transfer list thus far.
And I think a lot of people are going to go, well, look at the turnovers. And
Right,
that's fair.
right.
I think that's fair. But I think you have to remember, this group is just so different and new. And Wolf is trying passes that some of the players on the floor haven't even remotely, they had no idea it was coming. So I think as this process continues to grow, it takes a while sometimes for some of these transfer heavy teams to have the light turn on for them. Sometimes it takes till March, like NC State last year. But this is a situation where I think Michigan's turnover rate is going to continue to go down and down as the season progresses. And I think Wolf's will as well, as his teammates kind of get used to, hey, when I cut, maybe if I only have a half step lead, yeah, the ball's still coming, because he has such an he's so fearless. He will try passes that I don't think many players, even point guards, would even think to even assume. So his IQ has been through the roof. He's awesome.
And, to that point, I want to divert quickly here. That last play of the game last night in the Jimmy V Classic, they're down 2. They run Wolf off just a little bit of a pin down, if you will, get him the ball at the elbow. It's a fake handoff with the inbound, and they're trying to set up Roddy Gale on that back cut out of the corner. I think Wolf could have let him a little bit more, but if you're Roddy Gale, you've got to keep cutting. Like that, Dusty, that was a heck of a play. That was the right play, and it should have gotten a layup. You go back and watch the highlight of that, Roddy Gale is open. Now, Danny Wolf doesn't get it far enough past the defender, but I think part of that is because Roddy Gale doesn't keep cutting. That type of chemistry is going to keep happening as the year goes on, to your point. And I think you're going to see not only the turnovers go down, but by extension, the assists go up, because his ball handling and his passing for his size is off the charts. The 3-point shot's going to improve too. He's only at 29% for the year so far. He was at 35% last year. You put all those things together. And as I said, if he can get through those nagging injuries, he's got other levels he can get to here. All right, the last question. Well, last individual-based question. Who is your coach of the year so far in college basketball?
For me, I'm going to Iowa State with TJ Otzelberger, just because I think the MO with him is, he's this defensive mastermind. And Iowa State's on pace for its best offense in the Ken Pom era, which dates back to 1997. Last few years, Iowa State's played really slow. This year, Otzelberger's completely changed the tempo. They play so fast. They're averaging 23 points a game in transition so far this year, and that's not against just a cupcake schedule where they're just beating up on low majors or mid majors. They're doing it against great teams on this slate, and I just feel like everything is coming together for Otzelberger. They've been terrific after timeouts. Iowa State's one of the most efficient teams on baseline out-of-bounds plays this year offensively, and they have a little bit of everything that they can get to. And I think the transfer portal additions here, really smart scouting too by him. And we have to give him credit for the general manager part of college basketball as well. Joshua Jefferson, the transfer out of St. Mary's, has been terrific defensively, but he gives them something different in transition because he's so skilled and can handle it. There's times where Iowa State's scoring in transition and their 2 bigs have touched the ball. Deshaun Jackson, another transfer out of Charlotte's been phenomenal for them. It's just another play finisher. This front court is so much more better at finishing plays inside and just having a little bit more skill than what Iowa State had in the past. And he's completely weaponized Keshawn Gilbert this year. Every time Gilbert gets the ball, he's just being instructed to fly up the floor. And Gilbert is a one-man fast break. He's beating 1 defender, 2 defenders, 3 defenders, 4 defenders, just getting to the rim constantly. Gilbert's shooting 87% in transition this year. And when he doesn't score or make a bucket, he's getting to the free throw line at a super high clip. So I think that Otzelberger's done a phenomenal job with this group, just finding ways to best maximize his team. Before in the past, it was better to slow it down and drag it into the mud and make it a 59-55 slobber knocker type of game. This year, it's better for Iowa State to get out and run. And Curtis Jones has been great. Milan Momcilovic, you still have to trust him. Nate Heisey, a little transfer out of Northern Iowa, didn't really create a lot of noise. He was a huge part in shutting Cam Jones down. He's been awesome, especially in transition as well. So this group looks like the best team in the Big 12, and I think a lot of people would have had them third at the highest in the preseason behind Kansas and Houston.
Now, you just wrote about their offensive revolution, so to speak. Where can people find that piece?
CBSSports.com.
All right, CBSSports.com. Check it out. My pick is Mark Pope. Not only beating Duke, but then going to Seattle and beating Gonzaga. I think you take away that Clemson win, they'd be undefeated right now. They're 9th in offense, 24th overall in defense. And they've gotten buy-in from the roster. My question for this group growing in is, with so much depth and not a clear hierarchy, How difficult was it going to be to figure out roles? Mark Pope has handled that. And then he's handled adversity. Lamont Butler going on, Kirk Kriisa going out this weekend. What's he do? He tells Jackson Robinson to play the point, and it goes exceptionally well. On top of that, they are playing modern basketball, which Kentucky fans are delighted over. 42% of their shots are threes, and there were a lot of questions about this because BYU took more threes than twos last year and said, hey, he can't play that way at Kentucky. No, he can't, but he found a happy medium. It's a modern offense with terrific spacing and enough three-point shooting, but not too much three-point shooting because this year's Kentucky team is a vastly different job than last year's BYU team. The last 2 points I want to make. He carries himself, and I'm this is what I'm being told by people close to that program. The humility that he carries himself with, there's so much pride in representing Kentucky, and it's not about him. That comes through on camera, and it has also come through on the ground. So he's galvanizing that fan base in ways that are only being intensified by the fact that they're coming up with big wins over Gonzaga, over Duke. And the last point I'll make is I've been really intrigued by some of the schematic decisions he's made on the defensive end, specifically in that Gonzaga game. They were in that 1-3-1 zone, and sometimes they would switch to man after one pass, and sometimes they would stay 1-3-1. There was a play late in the game where Gonzaga came out and they got a kind of a deep high-low, if you will. It was like a mid-post catch, and then they got a short corner dive for a dunk. Mark Pope immediately called the timeout, and I remember thinking to myself, is he going to get out of it here? Is he going to go back and just play straight zone? And he tweaked it. What they did is they continued to show 1-3-1. Then they went to man after one pass. But he stuck to what he did, and he played that chess match with Mark Few, and he ended up getting a big win. So I've been impressed with kind of all aspects of what he's done so far. He would be my coach of the year 1 month in.
No, I love that one too. A couple other nuggets on him. What he's done with Lamont Butler has been unbelievable. Butler was a guy who we had 4 years of a sample size of him being a pretty mediocre offensive player. This year, he's posted the highest offensive rating of his career by far. He's shooting well over 70% at the rim after shooting 50% at the rim last year. And then to your tactic point too, the schemes at Duke as well were huge in that second half. He changed their pick and roll coverages big time after halftime to completely revamp it and was able to get a big win there. So I think there was a lot of clamoring for, hey, like, do we have the X's and O's advantage on the sidelines at Kentucky the last few years? I think you feel like pretty good about your X's and O's this year if you're a Kentucky fan.
Yeah, and like, let's be clear. Coaching is recognizing that it's a probability game, right? Like, you could make the right decision and the play could still go the other way. Like, you could stay in that 1-3-1 and Gonzaga could come out and score again. And then all the narratives are, what a bad move. So I think it's important we analyze the process and not the outcome. The outcome has been good so far. But I think the process has just been smart too. Offensively, like, they're running good stuff. Everybody's better in supreme spacing. That's just the way it is. And defensively, they've shown the willingness to adapt as the game goes on and to be able to execute multiple looks. So it's been good stuff. All right, the last question here, Trotter. We are 1 month in to the college season. Who is your current pick to win the NCAA championship?
I think I'm showing a ton of restraint by not talking about Auburn again. So again, I'll go with Duke. I think they're one of the 3 teams I would say is on like that super inner tier of teams that I think can win the title. Again, it goes back to a defense that I think is a complete, utter fortress right now. They are just swallowing teams up at the rim. They force a lot of contested jumpers. You're not able to get anything easy at the basket. They're doing a good job of defending without fouling. The perimeter size continues to show up. And I love the way that this front court can really evolve and change. Cooper Flagg is obviously the staple, but Malik Brown, the transfer out of Syracuse, has been phenomenal for them in their closing lineup defensively. He just does all the little things well, just like that was his MO out of the portal, and he's done just that so far for Duke. Zion James is another great defender. So I think some questions remain about Duke, especially with those late-game offense. I think that's going to continue to improve, like we talked about earlier with Cooper Flagg. But Tyrese Proctor has turned a corner this year. He is a complete, utter sniper from knockdown range. Like, he's just knocking down every one of his catch and shoot threes. He's playing with a lot more pace and poise. So, and they also just have it helps to have one of the most talented rosters in the country, right? Like when you could just tap the Isaiah Evans button and he's going to come in and hit 6 threes against Auburn. Like there's going to be a day where Caleb Foster knocks down a bunch of shots for Duke in a big game. There's going to be a day when Con Knippel starts to make threes again. And then there's going to be a day, and a lot of days probably, where Cooper Flagg is the best player on the floor. So I would go with Duke right now since I'm not allowed to pick Auburn again.
All right, I'm kind of with you, and here's why. Duke is 8-2 right now. They have the number 2 strength of schedule in the country. I think they're 2 possessions away from being 10-0. I think you can go back and you can take either one of those Cooper Flagg turnovers in that Kansas game. I'm sorry, in that Kentucky game, and they win that game. Then in the Kansas game, you can take away that Con Kneppel turnover, and they win that game. Now, those turnovers are gonna 3 months from now. They're going to be chalked up to learning experiences because both of those guys are freshmen. Cooper Flagg doesn't even turn 18 until later on this month. This is learning about how to compete in these highly stressful environments, and these are huge learning opportunities. It wouldn't serve Duke to be at home beating up on whatever local school by 70 points. They have gone out. They have played an incredible strength of schedule. They're going to benefit from it. The defense, everything you said is spot on. Here's what I will say on the offense. Right now, they are 13th overall in the country. And as you said, there's some guys that aren't yet making shots. I think this is the most well-constructed offensive system we've seen from John Shire in his 3 years on the job. I want to give you some numbers here. His first year, they were 250th in the country in terms of 3-point attempts to field goal attempts, meaning they took a whole lot of 2s and not a whole lot of 3s. They didn't have great spacing. Last year, they were 181 in the country in 3s relative to the rest of their offense, so middle of the pack. This year, they're 29th in the country. They're shooting more 3s than ever. It means they have more spacing than ever. This is the best constructed offensive system we've seen at Duke. The freshmen are going to keep getting better. And like I said, they're 2 possessions away from being 10-0 against the second hardest schedule in the country. That's why I think they are in as good of a position as anyone to call themselves national champions in about 3 or 4 months. All right, for Trotter and myself, that is it. Make sure you check out 247sports.com as well as cbssports.com. We've got wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates, and of course, you're going to want to keep it locked right here on the 24/7 Sports channel for all the latest in college basketball and college football. As always, thanks for watching.